Welcome to Essential Ingredients, powered by NextGen Purpose. EI serves up thoughtful conversations with industry leaders and pioneers who support a regenerative future for our food system. The stories shared by our guests are meant to spark curiosity and inspire informed global change. So welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm your host, Justine Reichman. With me today is Bruce Friedrich. He is the founder and CEO of Good Food Institute. Welcome, Bruce.
Thanks, Justine. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm delighted to have you here. I'm so pleased to get to meet you. The man behind Good Food Institute. I'm super excited to learn more.
That's extremely kind of you. I'm really delighted and honored to have been invited to share this time with you.
Thank you. Well, I'm excited because I know that you guys are doing such great work, and I only know a small piece of it. I've come into contact with a few people that have come out of the Good Food Institute, and what they're doing is amazing. So I can only imagine what you guys are doing to provide that space for them, that resource, that community is really amazing. And I can't wait to share that with the community. So before we go on any further, can you just share and talk a little bit about the Good Food Institute for those that are unfamiliar with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the GFI mission is to create a world where alternative proteins are no longer alternative. And we do that by, I guess the plurality of GFI's team members are probably scientists. Our global battle cry is that governments should be funding open access alternative protein research and development and should be incentivizing private sector activities. So basically patterned on what has worked for renewable energy and electric vehicles, government should be doing that. And then we do a lot to help across the corporate / industry sector, from sort of even pre-startup, helping people figure out what companies to start, all the way up to working with the really big guys, the Tysons, the Cargills, the ADMs, the JBSs. So sort of three legs of the stool. One is science, and probably the plurality of GFI's team members are scientists. We are a science-based organization, a lot of policy and lobbying, a lot of industry work. And we do that in 6 areas of the world. So GFI is a consortium of organizations. We have GFI US, which has about 75, maybe a little north of that, full-time team members. And then we have probably 80 people across GFI affiliate organizations in India, Israel, Brazil, Asia Pacific out of Singapore, and Europe out of both Brussels and London.
Wow, that's amazing. So what inspired you to start GFI?
So GFI's founding question is, how do we feed close to 10 billion people without burning the planet to a crisp? And we were looking at the climate, biodiversity, and global health impacts of industrial animal agriculture. So animal agriculture is responsible for about 1/5 of global direct climate emissions, uses something like 80% of agricultural land that is used globally, consumes about 70% of medically relevant antibiotics that are produced by the pharmaceutical industry. And these are huge problems for global biodiversity, a huge contributor to climate change, a contributor to antibiotic resistance. And then you look at the UN Food and Agriculture Organization saying we're going to have to produce 70 to 100% more meat by 2050. For 50 years, the global health and animal communities and the environmental community have been begging people to eat less meat. And yet, even in developed economies, per capita meat consumption is as high as it's ever been. So that's the reality that we were faced with. And it occurred to us that meat is made up of lipids, aminos, minerals, and water. Everything that exists in meat also exists in plants. And then, so we can biomimic the entire meat experience using plants. And because it's so much more efficient, we should be able to get to a place where the products taste the same or better and cost the same or less. And we can simply win in the marketplace. For people who want to eat actual meat, we can use tissue engineering. We can use the same tissue engineering that's used in therapeutics. We can grow the cells directly rather than funneling crops through animals, which is extraordinarily inefficient we can grow the cells directly and create cultivated meat. So that's kind of the brainstorm, and that's also the focus.
So when you were coming up with this, was there a team of you? Were you in a room with a group of people? Like, where did this originate?
It originated from people like Ethan Brown, the founder of Beyond Meat, Pat Brown, the founder of Impossible Foods, a buddy of mine for, gosh, north of 20 years, who was on the founding board of Impossible Foods and is still there. Tal Ronan, another buddy of mine, Josh Tetrick, who I've known for a really long time, and just chatting with people about, I mean, the inefficiency of growing crops to feed them to animals so that we can eat animals. So the most efficient animal at turning crops into meat is the chicken. It takes 9 calories fed to a chicken to get 1 calorie back out in the form of chicken meat. For feedlot beef, it's 40 calories in to get 1 calorie back out. So I imagine all of your listeners are concerned about food waste, and we should be concerned about food waste. But we're wasting 40% of the food that is created globally is wasted. The physiology of the chicken means 800% food waste. So you have to grow 9 times as many crops, use 9 times as much water, pour on 9 times as much fertilizer as well as pesticides and herbicides to get 1 calorie from a chicken than you would get if you ate those crops directly. The problem is the vast majority of people are not going to eat those crops directly. But what we can do is figure out how to turn those crops into something that is indistinguishable from the vantage point of the meat eater. So the brainstorm here is similar to the brainstorm of renewable energy and electric vehicles. We're not going to convince people, you know, en masse. We're not going to convince the world to consume less energy. We have not done that. Energy consumption just goes up and up and up. We're not going to convince people to buy fewer cars or drive less en masse. You know, very noble to, you know, I ride my bike. That's my primary mode of transportation. And it's noble for individual action is noble and important. But the real dividends come with renewable energy and electric vehicles, where you're not changing, you know, people want to drive and you're not changing people want to consume energy. Same thing here. Globally, we will produce 70 to 100% more meat by 2050. But we can make that meat from plants and cultivate it from cells in the same way that we're going to consume more energy and drive more. But we can make that energy renewable, and we can make the cars electric. Exact same concept.
I think it's brilliant. I mean, I think it's so smart. And I think it's really, in the same breath, I also think it's so ambitious. I mean, the thinking is ambitious and very forward thinking. And I think it's so smart. So I'm right there. I'm with you on it. And I wish I understood it, like to figure it out myself, right? So I'm curious, you know, on an individual level, right? We have businesses that are, you know, innovative and listening to this and will be inspired by this and want to figure out their own businesses. And then we have end consumers that are listening because they want to make more informed choices, which you also talk to, because it allows us to make more informed choices as a consumer going to the store. But I'm wondering, you know, as a business, what do you think is a need out there as we're looking at all these things? What isn't being touched right now, or what do you think is new and next for people to look at to build?
Well, we have a ton of ideas. So these industries are extraordinarily nascent.
Yeah.
So my one thing I would suggest that people do is sign up for some of our newsletters. If you go to gfi.org/newsletters, we have both a bi-weekly newsletter that sort of covers the waterfront of alternative proteins, and we have a monthly newsletter for investors. We also have something called the GF Ideas community. So we have a monthly business of alt protein webinar and a monthly science of alt protein webinar. And then we do kind of consistent deep technical dives over time. So somebody who's interested in starting a company in alternative proteins, if you join the GF Ideas community, which is just gfi.org/community, you can find co-founders. That happens a lot. You can dive into some of our ideas for white spaces. We have a lot of ideas for white spaces. I keep tossing out gfi.org URLs, so I think I'll probably stop doing that.
No, all good. We like that because we're trying, you know, Next Gen Purpose and Essential Ingredients is trying to connect the people. It's isolating being a founder. It's isolating doing it by yourself. Let's bring people together here.
Yeah,
So
gfi.org/community is our
we'll put it in the
GFI.
show notes too. For those that are watching the video, we'll put it in the show notes, but continue saying it for those that are listening to the podcast.
And then gfi.org-ASAP, which is our Advancing Solutions in Alternative Proteins, is where it's kind of it's not exactly hive mind because it's fairly well curated, but it's ideas for areas that require a lot more activity, both open access activity as well as ideas for startups across the spectrum of alternative proteins. Mostly they're B2B ideas. The consumer packaged goods area and alternative proteins is pretty well spoken for, but there are lots of opportunities. Like right now, the number of companies that are sort of all doing kind of the entire aspect of whatever field they're in, and their CPG companies, it's extraordinarily inefficient. So we do a lot of work to figure out what are the most important business to business areas where startups could help all of the companies in plant-based meat or all of the companies in cultivated meat. And then once somebody actually starts a company, we have founders roundtables. We have a monthly B2B focused webinar that is exclusively for CEOs and CTOs in cultivated meat companies, and just lots and lots of stuff focused on building the ecosystem.
That's great. What a great community. What a great resource in such a new, it's a new space. So I think that there's so much learning going on, and to be able to have those resources there for people to share is just, it's a gift for people. It's a gift.
That's very kind of you, Justine. Thank you.
So I know you've seen a bunch of companies go through there. Some succeed, some fail. I mean, it's the nature of it, right? I mean, it's, as a founder, we fail and we succeed, and we fail and we succeed, and that's just it. But I'd love to hear a couple stories that, if you can share, of companies that have come through that you've seen that are really innovative, whether they've worked or failed, whatever you can share. I'd love to hear a couple of those. Some of the great innovations you've seen or things that have come through.
Yeah, I mean, there are kind of an overwhelming number of companies that have come along, and it feels a little odd to like sort of select one and not select another.
No, I understand. Not to play favorites. It was maybe more to share something that has come through, and maybe share the journey so that people can get a sense of what it's like to come there, connect, and understand that these things, what it's like to be part of the community.
Yeah, I mean, one of the more interesting stories is somebody who was at McKinsey, and he went to McKinsey specifically with the goal of getting McKinsey super excited about alternative proteins. And the team at McKinsey that now leads on alternative proteins, they are super enthusiastic and they credit him. But then B, it was interesting to me that he really at McKinsey had the opportunity to dive into plant-based and cultivated meat and figure out what he thought the sort of gaps were. And he ended up leaving McKinsey and starting a company called Arc Biotech. And Arc Biotech is focused on designing bioreactors, which is definitely one of the sort of two critical technology elements that are most underserved in alternative proteins, which I think is like kind of fun and inspiring and exciting, leaving a very cushy job as a McKinsey consultant to dive into
leaving a paycheck, insurance, all of it.
Yeah, the choppy waters of starting a company. But I mean, the number one thing that really is necessary, and GFI's global battle cry, is that alternative proteins is the one food and agriculture solution to the massive climate change contribution that comes from food and agriculture that analogizes to renewable energy and electric vehicles. So everything else, there are lots of things that are worth working on. Climate change mitigation is definitely an all hands on deck situation. But the idea of renewable energy is, let's erase the green premium. Let's make renewable energy that competes on price with fossil fuels. And we can simply shift. Again, we're not trying to convince people to consume less energy. We're shifting to something that doesn't have the same adverse climate impact.
Right.
The same thing is true of electric vehicles. We're not telling people you can't drive. We're changing the nature of driving and replacing combustion engines with electric vehicles. Here too, that's what we're doing with plant-based and cultivated meat. It's not you can't eat meat, it's here, let's make meat in a different and better way. So like this is a phone, even though it doesn't have a cord, and this is a camera, even though it doesn't have analog film. 25 years ago, to have a phone, you would have needed a cord.
Right.
25 years ago, to have a camera, 99% of it would not have been digital. It would have required analog film. That's a pretty brief period of time to radically transform what it means to talk on the phone, or, you know, we're on a Zoom call. That didn't exist, you know, significantly less than 25 years ago. So the endeavor, GFI's endeavor, is to divorce animals from the need for live animals, with all of the positive benefits that come from that. And governments should be funding it. Governments are putting billions and billions of dollars into renewable energy infrastructure and incentivizing the private sector as well as R&D. Governments are doing the same thing for electric vehicles. For the exact same reason, governments should be putting billions of dollars into funding research centers all over the world focused on alternative proteins, and also to incentivizing the private sector to make, you know, life for Arc Biotech and other plant-based and cultivated meat companies and parts of the plant-based and cultivated meat ecosystem, to ensure that those companies are successful. And for anybody,
we're going to see that soon? Do you think we're going to take a? Do you think that's going to happen?
I do think that's going to happen. I think the case is so incredibly ironclad. But what we need from people who are listening or viewing, we need to mobilize the NGO community. So we need to mobilize the political community. We also need to mobilize the NGO community. So the really big green groups, the big green foundations, the global health groups, they need a policy focus that includes alternative proteins as a part of what they're supporting and what they're working on. And then we need to be petitioning in the US, NSF and USDA predominantly, but other agencies as well. And around the world, we need to be convincing governments to fund this sort of work and to incentivize private sector activity. And I am super optimistic. Up until a couple of years ago, the amount of funding in the last decade was zero. And now we've seen something like $200 million just in the last couple of years going into this. So from zero to $200 million is definitely moving in the right direction.
Really in the right direction, right? What do you think is going to make what do you think will push it over the edge? Where do you think, how do you think we'll get to the next level now to get them to really make that infusion and take that next step?
I think we're moving in the right direction. So last November, the UK's Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office released a report. And they said that with $10.1 billion per year, $4.4 billion going into research, and whatever, 7.6, is that right? 7.7? 6.7, yeah, gets you to 10.1. Going into private sector incentives, we could get to more than 50% of meat being alternative proteins by 2050. At a gross value add to the economy of $1.1 trillion, climate benefits of $5.5 trillion per year, 9.8 million new jobs, and reduced food costs because you're using significantly fewer inputs, reduced food costs of 10 to 12%. So we need more thought leadership. We need more McKinsey's and Boston Consultings and Chatham Houses. We need more reports like that from the UK Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. But we are seeing governments like Singapore, the Netherlands, Denmark, Israel. I mean, Singapore and Israel are really the global leaders on alternative proteins because they're small, and it's incredibly inefficient to cycle crops through animals to feed your populations. So they would like to stop doing that. But yeah, I think we've seen a lot of progress in the last few years. I think we are on a significant upward trajectory that will continue. So I'm super optimistic, but plugging into these sorts of endeavors is how listeners and viewers can really, I think, make a difference.
I mean, I think that's so important. And if we can encourage our listeners to do one thing, what would it be?
I don't think there's, I mean, if somebody's a university student, I would say go into science and join, start an alt protein project chapter. So GFI's university chapter program is called the Alt Protein Project. We just doubled from 16 to 32 university campuses. So if you are at a university, we need you to go into biotechnology or tissue engineering or plant biology, meat science for that matter.
What if you're a founder? What if you're a founder? What would you say to founders?
If you are a founder, I would say join the GF Ideas community. If you're a CTO founder, what is your scientific expertise? If you're a business focused founder, find a CTO, but also dive into the GF Ideas community. Spend some time on the gfi.org/ASAP, familiarizing yourself with the white spaces and found a company to fill one of the white spaces.
And if you're an end consumer?
I think end consumers, the Impossible Burger, the Beyond Burger, getting politically active. So this is a bipartisan endeavor. We'll be launching a protein innovation caucus. We have 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans supporting the caucus. Ted Lieu just got a whole bunch of people to co-sign letters about the importance of alternative proteins to global development. And it's a bipartisan letter. So contacting your member of Congress and saying this is critically important. If they're a Republican, probably focus on jobs, focus on U.S. global competition, focus on ways for farmers to sell their crops. If your member of Congress, senator or representative is a Democrat, you can focus on climate mitigation and global health. We do have, GFI.org is kind of the Wikipedia of alternative proteins. So it's both how to get involved from wherever you are in your stage of life or profession, and then also what are the strongest arguments. So something like our global competitiveness report that we put together with the Breakthrough Institute is just incredibly powerful in a bipartisan way. If you go to gfi.org/climate, you'll find the sort of our climate briefing paper that we put together with climate advisors and Climate Works Foundation. So just overwhelming amounts of resources and ways to get involved.
Awesome, Bruce. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a wealth of knowledge, a huge amount of information. I'm going to go online and see what I can find out. I'm overwhelmed. And I can't wait to do more, get more involved and find out more so I can make more informed choices myself.
That's incredibly kind of you, Justine. I'm really excited and enthused by everything that you're doing with the community and growing out all of your endeavors. It's really, really fun, and I'm honored to spend a little bit of time with you.
That's very kind of you to say, and I'm excited because I hope that we can continue this conversation as we expand and we continue to grow, and continue to have you be part of Next Gen Purpose and be part of the community further. So
I would love that.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I want to thank our guests for joining us, and we look forward to continuing these conversations. To learn more about these episodes and access show notes, go to nextgenpurpose.com and choose podcast. If you like this episode, head to Apple Podcasts or your favorite platform to subscribe and leave us a review. Visit the Next Gen Purpose YouTube channel to subscribe to our EI videocast and give this episode a like while you're there. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Next Gen Purpose, and connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram at Justine_Reichman. Thanks for joining us.